Welcome to the show. A year from now, a lot of people are going to look at their workday and feel like reality bent a little. Not because the software got nicer, but because the software started acting on its own. If these conversations help you think more clearly about where work is headed, like, share, and subscribe to the Human Workforce Podcast. I'm Simon Carver, joined by Lachlan Reed and CJ Murphy.
Simon, this one's not your usual tidy little upgrade, hey? This is not the app got a fresh coat of paint. This is more like walking into the shed, reaching for your spanner, and finding out the bike already fixed itself and ordered the parts.
That's the right image. For the last few years, we've talked about AI as a helper, a drafting partner, a coding assistant, a faster search box. What's changing now is the role. The system is no longer just supporting the worker. It is beginning to perform the work.
And when you say perform, you don't mean it spits out an answer in a chat window. You mean it sits inside the workflow itself, right? Inside email, operations, project tools, all the moving parts.
Exactly. A chatbot waits. It waits for a prompt, gives you language, maybe gives you a summary. An agentic system doesn't wait in the same way. It can monitor a process, connect systems, make limited decisions, trigger actions, and keep going across multiple steps. That is a very different category of capability.
And that's the bit people miss. They still reckon they're shopping for better software. Nah, better software helps you click faster. Synthetic workforce infrastructure means you barely click at all. The thing just gets on with it.
Synthetic workforce infrastructure is the phrase that sticks for me because software sounds like a tool in a toolbox. Workforce sounds like somebody or something that has a seat at the table. That's a bigger psychological jump than most companies are admitting.
Yes, and we've seen this pattern before. Organizations often prepare for the last change, not the next one. They budget for automation as cost savings. They plan for AI as a feature. But if the real shift is delegation at scale, then the operating model changes. Reporting lines change. Decision rights change. The shape of a team changes.
It's like thinking you're buying a better ute and then realizing you accidentally hired a fleet. Even a kangaroo could trip over that one.
Let me try to say it back because I think this is where listeners either get it or they don't. The old model was human opens 5 tools, moves information between them, decides what happens next. The new model is the system lives across those 5 tools and moves the information itself. The human becomes, what, supervisor? Editor?
Almost. Supervisor is part of it, but it's bigger than editing outputs. The human becomes the shaper of intent and the reviewer of outcomes. And that sounds efficient, but at what cost? Because once systems can execute across a workflow, the center of gravity moves away from human effort.
And if your company's still saying, don't worry, it's just another assistant, that's probably too comfy by half. If something can read the signal, hop systems, make a call, and finish the loop, that's not Clippy with muscles. That's a new worker wearing no boots.
Which is why the next 12 months could feel less like adoption and more like rupture. Not because the technology appeared out of nowhere, but because the social meaning of work changes all at once when the helper becomes the actor.
All right, let's make it dead simple. You've got a project manager. Call him David. Today, David's day gets chewed up by email, follow-ups, escalation notes, chasing ops, smoothing over annoyed clients, drafting updates. It's a dog's breakfast. Now picture David pouring his morning coffee. Before he's had the second sip, his agent has read the angry client email, found the delay, checked what happened in operations, pushed for a resolution, offered compensation, and drafted the response. David's not doing the scramble anymore. He's approving the outcome.
The before the second sip part is what gets me. Not because it's fast. Speed is almost the boring part. But because escalation, resolution, and the draft response used to be the actual substance of David's job.
Right, and that's the psychological shift most people are not prepared for. You are no longer the engine of throughput. You are the governor of outcomes. You don't necessarily push every task forward with your own hands. You set direction, constraints, approvals, exceptions.
And governor of outcomes sounds elegant until you ask the next question. Governor over what exactly? Over one assistant? 10 agents? 50? Because that starts to sound less like personal productivity and more like management without managers.
That's where the rise of world models matters. We're moving beyond systems that only predict likely words or likely next steps. More advanced models are starting to reason about relationships in the world, cause and effect, dependency, consequence. Supply chain delays lead to operational breakdowns. Service failures shape customer behavior. One event creates another.
So not just here's the probable reply, but here's why the mess happened in the first place. That's a massive difference. One's autocomplete. The other's more like a foreman who can smell rain before the job site turns to mud.
That's a good analogy. Prediction says, this usually comes next. Causal reasoning says, because this happened, these three things are likely to follow. So intervene now. That's how you move from reactive operations to preemptive enterprise intelligence.
And once you have preemptive intelligence, productivity breaks loose from hours. That old equation, one person, one block of time, one amount of output, it starts to fail.
Yeah, and on paper, that sounds bonza. More output, fewer headaches. But here comes the sting in the tail. If a company doesn't need 50 analysts because 5 directors can manage 500 agents, that's not just efficiency, that's workforce redesign with the serial numbers scratched off.
And the part I worry about most is the entry-level collapse. If machines absorb junior work, the first drafts, the routine analysis, the follow-up tasks, the coordination labor, where do people learn? Where do they make low-stakes mistakes? Where do they build judgment before the stakes become high?
Entry-level collapse is one of those phrases that lands like a brick. Because junior work has never just been cheap labor. It's been apprenticeship. It's where you earn pattern recognition.
Too right. You don't become sharp by magically appearing at the top of the ladder. You become sharp by stuffing up the little stuff first. If the machine swallows all the little stuff, the ladder gets awfully skinny.
Which brings us to the deeper governance question. If humans stop being doers of tasks and become governors of outcomes, then judgment matters more, not less. Someone has to decide what good looks like. Someone has to audit the machine's logic. Someone has to step in when the efficient answer is the wrong human answer.
And that someone can't just be whoever happens to own the dashboard. Because if the dashboard hides the reasoning, then the human is only rubber stamping. That's not governance. That's theater.
Precisely. The real question isn't what AI can do. It's who retains agency when AI can do more of it. If people become passive approvers, then control migrates quietly into the system itself, into the design, the defaults, the incentives, the metrics.
Which means the future of work might not belong to the fastest typer or the busiest inbox warrior. It might belong to the person who can direct intelligence, challenge it when it's off, and still remember there's a human on the other end of the chain.
If this episode gave you something useful to chew on, share it with someone who's trying to make sense of work right now, and subscribe to the Human Workforce Podcast.
Because this shift is coming, whether we name it clearly or not.
And better to name it now than get cleaned up by it later. Catch you next time.